And if the judges would please introduce themselves.
And good morning, or good afternoon. I'm delighted to be with you. My name is Tanya McConnell. I spent about 20 years as a professor of history at Columbia College in South Carolina, not the one in New York City, became involved in We the People there quite a while ago. So this is really one of the highlights of my year. Just about 3 years ago, I decided I wanted to do something more interesting, so I became a high school history teacher. And right now I'm teaching high school history and social studies at Ridgeview High School in Columbia, South Carolina. And so this is great, and look forward to hear what you guys have to say. I'll ask Miriam if she'll introduce herself. And you're on mute.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I'm Miriam Amarsadeghi. It's great to be with you guys. Truly, I participated in We the People the first year it was offered on the bicentennial of the U.S. Constitution a long time ago. I currently serve on the board of the Center for Civic Education, and I've spent a good part of my career providing civic education opportunities to people living in the Middle East, and in particular Iran, which is where I'm originally from.
And Michael.
All right, my name is Michael DePiro in Tallahassee, Florida. Work for the Florida Department of Education. Good to see our South Carolina friends here, and I guess I should say go Gamecocks, even though I don't know where you're all going to school. We have some Gamecocks in the family.
This is actually a group from New York.
Yeah.
Oh man, well you know what? I got nothing on for you. Go Gamecocks anyway.
Always good to check on that, though.
So where in New York are you all from before we get started?
We're from Westfield, New York.
Which is where in the state?
It's west of Buffalo, about.
West of Buffalo. Does that even happen and stay in the United States? Okay.
Oh man, you know I'm
You guys
telling
are
you,
cold territory, cold winters, right?
freezing up there.
Very cool.
Go ahead. We've introduced ourselves. Let's see. So if you will introduce yourselves, please, and your teacher.
Good afternoon. I am Dylan Ramel.
Good afternoon. I am Brooke Carlson.
My name is James Northrup, and this is our teacher, Mr. Berner.
And we are honored.
Hello. Thank you for volunteering your time on a Sunday. It's great. And yeah, we are sick of the snow. We just had 3 to 5 inches about 4 or 5 days ago. So I'm looking forward to watching this conversation you guys have as I check out here.
Yeah, well, I could turn the camera to the outdoors and all the flowers blooming in South Carolina.
Yeah, don't you wish you were there?
Or Florida.
I wish I could be a Gamecock fan, but no.
Thank you, teacher. Okay.
Let's get down to work here. We are your Unit 1 judges. We're interested in the philosophical and historical foundations of the American political system. As you probably surmised, we're asking question 2. Parliament passed the Habeas Corpus Act of 1679. In 1679. What is habeas corpus, and to what extent, if any, is it essential to the principle of limited government? How has the writ of habeas corpus evolved in the United States? Under what circumstances, if any, might the writ of habeas corpus place an unreasonable burden on the government? If you're ready, please begin.
Thank you. Above all else, the American people, past and present, value the rights of themselves and others throughout the world. The founders of the U.S. burdened themselves with the Herculean task of creating a constitution that both secured the rights of the people while at the same time ensuring that the government did not overstep its boundaries. Despite our country's centralization around these rights, it is not uncommon for other countries with less democratic governing to hold natural rights in high regards. One of the most important concepts given to us via England was the writ of habeas corpus.
Even though the U.S. and, for example, England's governmental structures are just ways, the two countries maintain the idea that habeas corpus is still a basic human right. Habeas ensures that no one is ever jailed unlawfully. Any person who has been arrested or detained must have their time in court or in front of a judge to ensure that justice is being served. It This in itself is a good way to ensure that people have recourse available if they ever were being treated wrongfully in our judicial system.
However, this crucial human right has not always stood the test of time as it should have. The Constitution specifically states in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2, that the right to habeas corpus can be suspended in cases of rebellion or invasion if the public safety requires it. The power to strip away a right of a man they are guaranteed in our country is akin to that of a god. If ever this power is used, it should only ever be used in the most extreme of cases and not to the detriment of the American people as a whole.
The most notable instances are that of Abraham Lincoln and George W. Bush, who both suspended habeas corpus during their presidential terms. George Bush justified suspending the vital human right by saying that he was against terrorism. The Constitution and the Military Commissions Act of 2006 is what ultimately justified George Bush's actions. The aforementioned bill was what allowed Bush to suspend habeas corpus of unlawful enemy combatants.
Abraham Lincoln, on the other hand, was slightly different in his usage of the suspension. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus for everyone that was arrested during the Civil War era. This, of course, was very controversial, as he was suspending the rights of countless Americans, originally without congressional approval, who had been fighting for what they had believed was the right cause. The Supreme Court even agreed that Lincoln's actions were unconstitutional. Shortly after, Lincoln pressed Congress to pass a bill that states anyone arrested in the rebellion shall be imprisoned in any fort, camp, arsenal, military prison, or other place of confinement by military authority while habeas corpus was still suspended.
While it was clear that Lincoln merely wanted to quash the rebellion, it was surprising the extent that he went to in certain cases. The suspension of habeas corpus and passage of the previously mentioned bills are in direct opposition to Lincoln's proposed laissez-faire plan of Reconstruction in the South called the 10% Plan. While these decisions were extremely controversial at the time, the historical circumstances of a civil war provided a reasonable explanation.
While these instances in which habeas corpus was suspended are controversial, there are circumstances in which it is excusable, circumstances in which rights are sacrificed for the greater good. In moments of insurrection, rebellion, or any other circumstance in which the government has difficulty functioning as intended, in which it is required to protect the American people in their interest, the concept of habeas corpus is extremely inconvenient for the government. And as such, it is acceptable that in these moments, habeas corpus is to be suspended to ensure the safety of the American citizens.
It is human nature to be flawed, make mistakes, and act swiftly in moments that require careful consideration. Because of this, the writ of habeas corpus is essential to ensure that we are not defined by our greatest mistakes.
And a wonderful way to end that conversation. Let's look at, let's dive into a bit more deeply into some of these ideas. You began talking about habeas corpus, I believe, as a natural right. I've got two questions I want to follow up on it. Is this habeas corpus, is it a natural right or is it a procedural right? And if you'll go with me with the idea that it's a procedural right, what is the underlying natural right that might support it?
Well, as the government itself is put into place by the people to serve them, I see it as both a natural right and a procedural right. As it is the right of man to form his own government, it is also the right of the man to be protected by his own government. So, through habeas corpus, we can ensure that men are being protected from what may in some instances be incorrect government procedure.
And we can see in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that everyone should have the right to a fair trial. And habeas corpus is a foundation to a fair trial to ensure that no one is being treated unequal and that the courts do not take advantage of the citizens.
However, I agree with both of my colleagues, but there have been instances where habeas corpus has not been in place where it should have. A huge example of this is Korematsu versus America or versus US, where Japanese Americans, without a trial or anything, were shoved into these different camps because they posed a threat, even though there was no evidence backing it up. It was just suspected terrorism. And this is an instance where habeas corpus has not necessarily stood up to where it should have been.
And by looking at other nations, we can see how the importance of habeas corpus in our own. For example, in Russia, a man named Alexei Navalny, he spoke out against the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, and was promptly put into jail. And now, Russia does not have the writ of habeas corpus. In fact, nothing actually preventing them from detaining him for up to 2 years. The only protection that man has at this moment is that his detainment can't last longer than 2 years, and that's something that should not happen.
In addition,
Let's move on. I want to give us time for more questions. Thank you. Miriam.
Yeah, I actually, my question follows on very much from your point about Alexei Navalny. Does the writ of habeas corpus, our due process protections, do they make us as a nation stronger, or are we more vulnerable or weaker because of them? Think about China, not a weak country, our chief adversary. And these rights are entirely lacking. In fact, there's a genocide going on right now. What do you think? Overall, long term, are we going to be stronger? Are we going to maintain our strength with all of these freedoms when our chief adversary or adversaries lack them?
Well, it will definitely be an uphill battle to take the high road and maintain to be this glimmering beacon to the rest of the world. We need to set an example for ourselves, even if it comes at the detriment of some of our power. Above all else, we should value human rights, not necessarily military strength or how we stack up to another nation.
if we are looking specifically at just one country's strengths to another country, then yes, we will be on the harder side of the battle. But the United States was formed to ensure that the citizens had rights that the government could not take away. And if the government did take away our rights, it would make the government would function much more concise with not as much conflict. But that is not the point of the United States and our governmental structure as a whole.
Okay,
And-
even so though, let me ask this, and then Brooke, maybe you can answer next. Do we actually buy ourselves strength and comparative advantage and resilience because of these freedoms? Or do you see them as a handicap, but one that we should have because we have loftier goals?
Well, at the end of the day, the government is made by the people. And if habeas corpus ensures that everyone is treated equally and has a right to a fair trial, no matter what, then that would make us stronger in the long run, because we may not be military stronger, but as a country itself, we are more united and together and can agree on various different amendments or laws if we are all treated the same.
All right, I'm gonna jump in here, and we looked a lot about the past, and I heard words like extreme cases, UN Declaration of Rights, misuse of government. I want to look at when the government may be justified in suspending habeas corpus 2021 and beyond. Can you make that constitutional application for me?
Well, for example, were another event to happen that was akin to the Capitol riot, the siege of the Capitol on January 6th, as it was in Maryland leading up to the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln promptly suspended the habeas corpus rights of Southern sympathizers in Maryland so as not to lose the Capitol. So perhaps if we were to see something like this again, where our country was pushed towards another civil war or great conflict between one another, we would see an instance in which it would be acceptable to suspend the habeas corpus of unlawful enemy combatants.
Was Lincoln right to do that?
Excuse me?
Was Lincoln right?
According to the Constitution, no, he was not right. As the president, he does not have that power. It's a specific power of the Congress.
So going on with what you were saying about the January, was it 6th or 5th events?
Mhm.
What then would give the authority to suspend habeas corpus? So what is your line drawn? Because we haven't seen it suspended much recently, other than I saw something with New York. So where's the line there that says, yes, this is okay to do?
Well,
In my opinion, this line would be drawn in the amount of time that this situation would occur. January 6th was a single instance, while George Bush was fighting terrorism, and this was seen as a drawn out conflict, along with Abraham Lincoln. He obviously, the Civil War did not start and end in one day. So I believe if the insurrection of January 6th led for a longer period of time, so it was the insurrection of January 6th to January 12th, then we would definitely see quick action of Congress to suspend habeas corpus to end the conflict as soon as possible.
And I'll yield if you want to finish your answers. I think we're running low on time. Does anybody else want to jump in on that?
yeah, sure. So long as what the enemy combatants were doing was posing a risk to the American health and well-being as a whole, I think it would be
finish your sentence.
I think it would be acceptable to suspend this should they continuously pose a threat to us as a nation.
Cool. Thank you, Jay.
Great job. Great use of evidence. I'm glad you brought up Navalny, a very real case that's happening right now with one of the great powers and that a lot of countries are looking to as a potential model. So they are judging the future of the rule of law by us. They're judging it by Russia, and they're deciding which direction they're going to follow. So this stuff matters enormously, and I think future historians will judge us by how we respond right now. And based on what you've said, I think we will do pretty well. Great conversation. I really appreciate the chance to be here. I'll give my colleagues a chance to respond as well. Michael, if you'll give us some comments as well.
Yeah. In your introduction statement, what I really like that you did, which I think is a little bit different than some other groups, is you did mention Lincoln's use, you did mention President Bush's use, but you did it as a contrast. So you contrasted Lincoln to Bush in their use. It would have been interesting to see that fleshed out a little bit more in terms of, to Tandy's question, was one justified, and to what extent was one more justified than the other? If any, they may both not be justified in your eyes, but just the way you framed it by contrasting both uses of the same thing, but looking at it through the lens of different conflicts. I think that was a very cool angle to take.
Yeah, you were the only team that we have judged who mentioned Navalny. Quite frankly, it's the most relevant and in your face example to bring in on this question. And it was heartening to see that your vision goes beyond your own community and your own nation, because these kinds of things, you know, in the words of Martin Luther King, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. These kinds of principles need to be considered, not just what one country does, but what's correct, what's right, you know, what's just. And this unit sometimes hits at unit 6 also, because what makes us strong as the United States influences the moral leadership we can have in the world too. And people like Navalny, the people who are fighting against the genocide in China, people who are at the forefront of democracy movements in the Middle East, they all look to the Declaration of Independence and they, as an aspiration, the United States Constitution for the kind of government that they want. And it's really rooted in the idea that these are human rights. And so, sorry, I talked a bit too much, but really good to get to know you guys through these concepts. Sometimes you can socialize with somebody for a long time, but it's through an exchange like this that you really get to know what people think on the things that really matter in life. So I want to encourage you to stay connected to these Unit 1 principles throughout your life, because they're going to make you stronger in your in your profession, whatever it's going to be, yourself as a democratic citizen, even in your personal life. So, and congratulations to your teacher.
Thank you.
Thanks again so much for your time on a Sunday. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you, guys.
Hey, tickets to South Carolina are cheap, just in case.